Okay, people, welcome to Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault press conference 2019. My name is Dr. Bonnie Burstow. I'm a full professor at OASI, and I'm chair of Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault, who is holding this press conference and who is holding the events that we're going to be telling you about, and that are the excitement that we are preparing for starting tomorrow. The speakers are first me, and then, if Sherry DeNovo makes it, Sherry, and we're very much hoping she does, because if you haven't heard Sherry, you're missing something. And then another wonderful speaker, Connie Neal, who's a shock survivor. I'll be introducing each of the speakers, and I will be sharing the press conference. What you need to know is that Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault, like a huge number of groups throughout the world, and especially Toronto, and especially Ontario, have been demonstrating against shock for decades. Connie and I, and Dawn, who's here in the audience, actually held hearings as early as the early 80s to try to stop shock. Days and days and days of hearings where people gave testimony. And we've been getting testimony for decades on how it has damaged people's lives, destroyed people's memory, made their lives something way less than it ever was before, with people never getting what they had back again, utter destruction of memory. In addition to that, there's huge research that showed that it was seriously affected people's memory, and that this was horrific. And so we kept on asking the government, please do something about shock. This is not an acceptable treatment. And guess what happened? They did a review and decided they were doing just fine. They had a few recommendations what changes they should make, and then they didn't do any of the recommendations. That was the result. Okay, then something very interesting happened in 2007. It's called the Sackheim Report. Sackheim, and guess what? A result that's very seldom talked about, but that those of us who held hearings back in the 80s know, because we could tell the difference between what people were saying. Direct proof, to a level way beyond what was necessary for statistical evidence, direct proof that women's brains are way more impaired by electroshock than men. The damaging to the memory is more profound. Finally, the proof was there. Now, that is particularly alarming when you think of the fact that 2 to 3 times as many women get shock. So it's mainly given to women. It's mainly given to women by men, often with the ignorance of the husband, sometimes with the active consent of the husband. And they are way more damaged by it. This is very worrisome. Okay. So once again, we are coming to the government and saying, pay some attention to this. It's not what you want to hear, but it's truth. And give us the truth. You are not living up to your fiduciary responsibilities by allowing this stuff to continue in hospitals. This is a violation. And we can sue you as easily as we can sue the truck manufacturers, because you have fiduciary responsibility there. That's the next. Right now, we are making the demand. Stop it now. Stop it now. How many more people have to be hurt? How much more proof does there have to be? Going further, not only do we have a demonstration starting tomorrow at noon against electroshock that's happening in front of the legislature building, so please people turn up. The following day, at a location which I will announce tomorrow, so the person to get in touch with is me, a hunger strike will begin. And the hunger strike is in the tradition of Mahatma Gandhi, that when the government is not acting properly, when the oppressor has his foot on your neck, you resort to dramatic, nonviolent resistance to protest what is happening. That's what we're doing. That's what people are doing, is a hunger strike. And Connie will be the main hunger striker. You'll be hearing from her shortly. And Basically, the government injured her body and her brain, the brain part of her body. She's putting her body on the line and fighting back. This is an 80-year-old shock survivor. And guess what? The media, for the most part, isn't hearing it. Said, it is my great pleasure to introduce somebody who I have been demonstrating alongside with and who I learned an awful lot about what happens to shock survivors from shock survivor, author, and activist Coalition.
Thank you very much. I first had shock treatment after I had a baby. You have had a baby and you're in postpartum depression. That's really all that you can do. And so they didn't try anything with me. No drugs, no talk therapy. I went directly to shock treatment. I went directly to the hospital and I had shock treatment, which wiped my brain clean. I didn't know that I had a baby. I didn't know who that man was who was checking me into places. He was my husband, but I had no idea who this was. And they gave me 21 more shock treatments. Now, by that time, they had caught up with drugs, so I got drugs too. And I would walk down the aisle in one of these facilities, was Hamilton, Ontario Hospital, and literally fall down, my face, and I would fall down on the ground and beg them to lower the dosages. All of my musical training, all of that was just gone.
So without further ado, because I think everyone knows who Sherry DeNoble is, I'll turn this over to Sherry.
What's truly shocking is that mine is the only private member's bill that's come forward on this in the legislature. That's shocking. One would think that if the general public, and I do believe this to be true, that if the general public knew that electroshock therapy was still happening, that most people would be, horrified by that very fact. The reality is they don't know. Most people don't know it's still happening and the rate at which it's happening. And so part of this crusade really is to shine a light on a dark place, which is to say, this is still going on. It didn't go out, with What Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's still happening. It's happening mainly to, as is said, to our mothers and our grandmothers. That's who it's happening to women. And coming up to Mother's Day, it's particularly appropriate that we highlight that reality. It's still going on, and it's still damaging brains, and the corollary fact that mainly those brains belong to our mothers and our grandmothers, our sisters, and to us. We'll keep going until we win, and like all fights for justice, I always say, the question is not will we win, but simply when we will win.
I'm opening this up to questions. You can aim questions at one person, at any person you want to, or at the entire panel. It's up to you. Mike.
Dr. Burstow, I guess as an expert you can answer this question. Why are women especially targeted for shock treatment?
Do you want the honest answer or the industry answer?
Both.
Okay, the industry answer is because it's mainly given for depression and women are more depressed than men. One response I can give you to that is women have a lot more reason to be depressed. It's called sexism. However, that's not the only answer. What it's found is that women were given shock 2 to 3 times as often as men, irrespective of the diagnosis, whether it was depression, anxiety, whatever, irrespective. So that point, the issue that women need it because they're more depressed becomes nonsense, no matter what the diagnosis they were given. Okay, I always go back to a famous quote by Myerson when I ask really what's going on. If you want to understand shock, you have to go back to the early days where they didn't pretend it wasn't brain damage, where they thought brain damage was a good thing, so advocated it. And in the early days, a big shock proponent was named Abraham Myerson. And here's what he said about shock, about the shock recipients. Quote, "These people have more intelligence than they can handle, and a reduction of intelligence is an important factor in the curative process." When you look at the statistics, it's very clear whose brains they see as having more intelligence they can handle, and who they don't mind damaging, and who they will interpret damages as an improvement.